All right, so you've given us quite a stack of materials here. Looks like we're going deep into strategic management.
Yeah, definitely a deep dive.
We've got excerpts from your study guide, some case studies on companies like Ethiopian Airlines, even the rise of digital banks in South Africa, like Capitec.
Fascinating stuff.
It is. Our mission, if you will, is to help you, the listener, distill the most important insights from all this material and understand how companies analyze their environments, build winning strategies, all that good
The
stuff.
fundamentals, yeah.
Exactly. And speaking of fundamentals, the study guide starts off, let's see, chapters 4, 5, and 6 are all about laying the groundwork, setting the stage.
Right, those early chapters.
Yeah, and it mentions this thing called analyzing the industry environment, which sounds pretty important.
It's crucial. Think of it like this before you even step onto the playing field.
You got to know the rules of the game.
Yeah. Exactly. So analyzing the industry environment is about understanding all those forces at play in your specific industry, like the level of competition, who are your suppliers, who are your buyers, what kind of regulations are you dealing with, and even things like what substitute products or services are out there.
It's like scouting out the competition before you even, suit up.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting because this is where tools like the PESTEL framework come in.
Pestle.
Yeah. So the study guide expects you to really understand this tool. It's all about analyzing these big picture factors, political changes, economic trends, social shifts, technological advancements, environmental concerns, and legal developments, things that can impact your industry.
That's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but it's all connected, and understanding those external forces, as you can imagine, could give you a serious edge.
I can see that.
The study guide really emphasizes that companies need to be both inward-looking, analyzing their own strengths and weaknesses, and outward-looking, understanding the opportunities and threats in their environment.
So it's like looking both ways before you cross the street.
Precisely. You've got to be aware of what's happening both inside and outside your company.
That makes sense. Okay, so speaking of strengths and weaknesses, that brings us to chapter 7, which seems to be all about what makes a company tick its resources and capabilities.
Right, getting into the internal workings of a company.
Exactly. And it keeps mentioning these distinctive capabilities, which sound like something you definitely want to have.
Absolutely. This chapter is all about figuring out what makes your company unique, what sets it apart from the competition.
Right, like its secret sauce.
Exactly. So distinctive capabilities are those unique strengths that give you a competitive advantage, things that are valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and organized effectively.
Okay, so in the South African context, like some of the companies we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
what would be some examples of those distinctive capabilities?
Well, the study guide actually has some great examples. Think about Sasol and their expertise in turning coal into fuel. I mean, that's a complex process. Not a lot of companies can do that. Right.
Or Discovery with their Vitality program. They've really shaken up the whole health insurance industry.
Totally.
And, of course, there's Capitec, which has disrupted the traditional banking sector with its, simple customer-centric approach.
Those are some impressive examples.
They are.
But how does a company actually go about, figuring out what its own distinctive capabilities are? It can't just be like, hey, we're good at this.
Right. It's not quite that simple. This chapter is all about learning how to do an internal assessment of your resources.
Yeah.
Things like finances, technology, people, brand reputation. And then you have to figure out how all those resources combine to create those unique capabilities.
It's like taking inventory.
Exactly. But inventory of your strengths. What makes you you?
Yeah, love that. Taking inventory of your strengths, okay? So now that you know what your strengths are, how do you actually, use them to succeed? That's where strategy comes in, right? You got it. Chapter 8 is all about crafting those winning strategies, and it introduces this framework. You're definitely going to want to know Porter's generic strategies.
Porter's generic strategies.
Yeah, so basically it lays out 3 main paths to achieving competitive advantage: cost leadership, differentiation, and focus.
Okay, break those down for me.
All right, so cost leadership is all about being the lowest cost producer in your industry.
Got it.
Like think Walmart or Ryanair.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They win by offering the lowest prices and attracting a huge volume of customers.
Makes sense.
Differentiation, on the other hand, is about making your products or services stand out as unique and valuable.
So it's not about being the cheapest. It's about being the best.
Exactly. Think Apple, BMW, they don't compete on price. They compete on quality, design, and brand prestige.
Okay, so you're either the cheapest or the best.
Yeah.
What about that third option?
Right. So focus is all about concentrating on a specific niche market
Okay.
and tailoring your products or services to meet the unique needs of that segment.
So like those luxury brands or, those highly specialized retailers.
Exactly. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're experts in a specific area.
Got it. So the key takeaway here is to choose the strategy that aligns with your company's strengths and, the competitive dynamics of your industry.
You nailed it. This chapter really wants you to understand that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to strategy.
Right. Every company is different.
The best approach is the one that leverages your unique capabilities and allows you to compete effectively in your chosen market.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've got a solid strategy, you're playing to your strengths, you're navigating the competitive landscape. What's next? How do companies, think about growth and managing a complex business environment?
That's where Chapter 10 comes in. It's all about that corporate level strategy.
Corporate level. Okay.
Yeah, and it's about making those big picture decisions that impact the whole company, not just individual business units.
Got it. So this is where you're thinking about like which businesses to be in, how to manage them effectively, how to create value across the whole portfolio.
Exactly. And the study guide lays out several corporate level strategies that you'll need to understand. So there's concentration, which is about focusing on a single industry and becoming a dominant player in that industry.
Okay.
Then there's vertical integration, which is all about controlling multiple stages of the supply chain, from raw materials to the finished product.
And then there's diversification,
Right.
where you're kind of spreading out into different industries, maybe to, reduce risk or capture new opportunities.
Right on. And the study guide uses some great examples from the South African business world to kind of illustrate these strategies. So you've got Supergroup, which has grown through acquisitions, Bidvest, which has expanded across a wide range of industries, and Naspers, which has this incredibly diverse portfolio that spans the globe.
It's like playing chess, but instead of moving pieces, you're moving entire businesses.
Haha, I love that analogy. And just like in chess, you need to think several moves ahead and anticipate how your competitors might react.
And what about when things aren't going so well? Like, what about companies that need to play defense? I think the document mentions defensive strategies, right?
It does. Chapter 10 also covers those tough choices that companies sometimes have to make when they're facing declining markets or, increased competition.
Right, when they're on the ropes.
Exactly. So there are strategies like turnaround, where you try to revive a struggling business.
Like a comeback story?
Exactly. Then you've got divestment, where you sell off parts of the company that aren't performing well, and even liquidation, which is kind of the last resort.
When you got to cut your losses.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm guessing the South African Airways, or SAA case study, is a perfect example of a company trying to navigate a turbulent industry and make those tough decisions to stay afloat.
It is. SAA's recent restructuring efforts really highlight how complex and challenging it can be to, turn around a struggling company, especially in such a volatile industry.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from analyzing the environment to crafting strategies to thinking about growth and defense. But it feels like we're still playing on a local field. What about going global? Chapter 11 is all about conquering the international stage, right?
That's right. In today's interconnected world, it's hard to ignore the global marketplace, but going international, it's no walk in the park. There are a whole new set of challenges and opportunities to consider.
I bet. So what are some of the key things that companies need to think about when they're, taking their business global?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's realizing that what works in one country might not work in another. You have to be aware of these cultural differences, political systems, economic environments, all of that.
So you can't just take your domestic playbook and expect it to work overseas.
Exactly. And that's where all those different internationalization strategies come in. So the document outlines various approaches, each with its own, level of commitment and complexity. So you've got exporting, which is the simplest option, right? You just produce your goods at home and sell them overseas.
Okay, simple enough.
Then there's licensing, where you grant another company the right to use your intellectual property, like your brand or your technology, in exchange for royalties.
Got it.
And what about franchising? Isn't that similar to licensing?
It is. It is similar, but usually it's a more comprehensive agreement where, the franchisor provides more support and control over the franchisee's operations, like branding, marketing, quality standards, all of that.
Right. Think fast food chains. That's like the classic example of franchising.
Got it. Okay. So those are kind of those less risky ways to go international. What about the more involved options?
Well, then you have joint ventures, where you partner with a local company to share the risks and rewards of entering a new market. And this can be a great way to, Gain access to local knowledge, resources, networks.
Tap into that local expertise.
Exactly. And then there's foreign direct investment, which is the most committed approach. So here you're establishing your own operations in a foreign country, building factories, hiring employees, really putting down roots.
So there's a whole spectrum of options, from like dipping your toes in the water to diving headfirst into the global pool.
Ha, that's a great way to put it.
But no matter which approach you choose, it sounds like understanding the local context is absolutely key.
Absolutely. The document actually has a term for this, liability of foreignness, which basically means that companies face all of these extra challenges when they're operating in these unfamiliar environments.
Right, like they might not understand the local market as well, might have difficulty navigating the regulations, or they could even run into cultural misunderstandings, right?
Exactly. So it's not just about having a great product or service. It's about being able to adapt and operate effectively in a completely different environment.
It's like learning a whole new language of business.
It is. And that brings us to a crucial element that's woven throughout all of these chapters, the human element.
The human element.
Yes. We can talk about strategies and frameworks all day long, but none of it matters without the right people and the right organizational structure to make it all work.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's people who are making those decisions and implementing those strategies.
Exactly. Chapters 12 and 13 really dive into this human side of strategic management, focusing on leadership and organizational architecture.
Yeah, it feels like those chapters are saying that even the most brilliant strategy is going to fail if you don't have the right people in place to execute it.
Absolutely. And the document emphasizes the importance of leadership in driving change and innovation. It explores these different leadership styles and highlights the power of transformational leadership.
Transformational leadership. Okay.
Yeah, these are leaders who can inspire their teams, create a shared vision, and empower people to achieve great things.
So we need those inspiring leaders who can get people on board with the strategy. What about the organizational structure itself? How does that play a role?
Well, think of organizational architecture as like the blueprint for your company.
Oh,
It's about how the different parts of the company are structured, how they interact with each other, and how they all work together to achieve those overall strategic goals.
So it's not just about having the right people, it's also about having the right structure in place to allow those people to work together effectively.
Exactly. A well-designed organizational architecture can be a huge advantage. It can help you execute your strategy more efficiently, adapt to changes more quickly, and really foster that innovation and collaboration.
Okay, and I'm guessing the McKinsey 7S framework comes in handy here. What exactly is that, and how can it help companies, build a more effective organization?
The 7S framework is a classic tool for analyzing and improving organizational architecture. So it looks at 7 key elements: strategy, structure, systems, shared values, skills, staff, and style. And the idea is that all these elements need to be aligned for a company to be truly successful.
So it's about looking at the big picture and making sure all the pieces fit together.
Precisely. It's this holistic approach to organizational effectiveness, recognizing that there's no single silver bullet.
Right, it's all connected.
It's about creating a cohesive, high-performing organization where everything works in harmony to support the overall strategy.
And I bet that harmony can be easily disrupted by, well, risk, right? The business world is full of surprises, pandemics, recessions, technological disruptions, you name it. Chapter 14 seems to be all about how companies can deal with that uncertainty and build resilience.
You're absolutely right. This chapter dives into the world of strategic risk management,
Okay,
and it acknowledges that the business world is unpredictable
definitely unpredictable.
and that companies need to be prepared for the unexpected. So it lays out this systematic process for identifying, assessing, and managing risks, from those that could disrupt daily operations to those that could threaten the company's very survival.
So it's not just about avoiding risk altogether. It's about understanding the risks you're facing and making, informed decisions about how to deal with them.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between playing it safe and taking those calculated risks.
Right, because sometimes you got to take risks to get ahead.
Absolutely. And the study guide uses some, powerful real-world examples to illustrate this, like Tiger Brand's listeriosis outbreak, which highlighted the importance of food safety and quality control,
Right.
and Toyota's airbag recall, which emphasized the critical role of thorough product testing and consumer protection.
Those are definitely some sobering reminders of what can happen when risk management goes wrong.
They are. But they also drive home the point that a proactive and comprehensive approach to risk management is absolutely essential in today's world. It's not something you can just tack on as an afterthought. It needs to be woven into the very fabric of the company's culture and operations.
And it seems like this is where leadership comes full circle, right?
Yeah.
Leaders need to set the tone and create an environment where risk is taken seriously.
Absolutely. Leaders need to champion a culture of risk awareness, encourage open communication about potential threats, and empower employees to raise concerns without fear of, reprisal.
That's so important.
It is. They also need to ensure that the company has the resources and processes in place to effectively identify, assess, and manage those risks.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from analyzing the industry environment to crafting those winning strategies to leading change and managing risk. Feels like a crash course in strategic management.
It is. And what's so fascinating is that these concepts aren't just relevant to, big corporations. They can be applied to businesses of all sizes,
Right.
and even to your own career.
That's a great point. So for you, the listener, what does all this mean? How can you take these insights and apply them to your own organization or even your own career path?
That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's what we'll be exploring in more detail in the next part of our deep dive. We'll take these theoretical frameworks and practical examples and see how you can actually use them to develop your own strategic roadmap for success.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so let's dive back into those study materials and, see how we can put these strategic management concepts into action because, it's not just about understanding those theories, it's about applying them.
Right, making it real.
Exactly. And speaking of making it real, the study guide talks a lot about strategic decision making.
Yeah, like how do you actually make those big decisions?
Right. And it's not just about following some kind of formula. There's a human element to it.
Yeah, for sure.
And chapter 4, it really emphasizes that these strategic decisions are rarely made in a vacuum, right? You've got teams of people, each with their own perspectives, experiences, maybe even biases.
Like a whole group project.
Exactly. So recognizing those dynamics and understanding how to navigate them, I think that's crucial for making those effective decisions.
So it's not just about crunching numbers and analyzing data. You've got to factor in the people too.
Exactly. And this chapter, it wants you to learn how to communicate effectively, how to build consensus, and how to create that shared understanding of the strategic vision.
So it's like getting everyone on the same page.
Precisely. Make sure everyone is rowing in the same direction, even if they're coming from different backgrounds or have different perspectives.
I like that, rowing in the same direction. Now, what about these specific characteristics of the decision itself? Like, how do those influence the process?
Well, some decisions are, pretty straightforward, while others are super complex and involve a lot of uncertainty. So the document, it stresses the importance of tailoring your decision-making approach to the specific situation.
Okay.
So, for those routine decisions, you might just rely on established procedures, data analysis.
Makes sense.
But for those big, hairy, uncertain decisions,
The scary ones.
yeah, you need to be a lot more flexible, gather as much information as you can and be willing to adjust your course as needed.
So it's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Mm.
Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a scalpel.
I love that analogy. And, the business world, it's kind of like this constantly shifting landscape.
Yeah.
So what worked yesterday might not work today.
It's like the Wild West out there.
It can be. So you've got to stay informed, be aware of those emerging trends, and be willing to, adapt that decision-making process as needed.
Okay, so that's where those strategic decision enablers come in, right?
Mm.
The study guide, it mentions those as the tools and resources that can help companies make more informed choices.
Exactly. Think of them as your strategic toolkit.
Got it.
These enablers, they help you gather that information, analyze that data, and turn all that raw input into those actionable insights. So things like market research, competitive intelligence, data analytics, even scenario planning. These are all tools that can help you make sense of the complex business world.
It's like having a GPS for your business.
Yes, it helps you navigate the terrain and avoid getting lost.
I like that. And one of the things these enablers help you do is analyze the macro environment.
All right.
Remind me again, what exactly is the macro environment?
Okay, so it's about taking a step back and looking at those big picture trends and forces that can impact your business, even if they're not directly related to your industry.
Okay.
So this is where the PESTLE framework we talked about earlier, that comes in handy.
Right, PESTLE.
Mm.
Political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors.
Exactly. It's like a checklist for scanning the horizon and identifying those big waves that could be heading your way.
Love that analogy. So by systematically analyzing each of these pestle factors, you can identify those potential opportunities and threats that might otherwise, fly under the radar.
Exactly. For example, like a change in government regulations could create a whole new market for your product, or an economic downturn could lead to a decrease in consumer spending. You got to be aware of these things
Right.
and factor them into those strategic decisions.
So it sounds like being aware of the macro environment is like especially important in a dynamic and, complex environment like South Africa.
You're absolutely right. And the case studies you've got in your materials, they highlight some of those key macro environmental factors that South African businesses have to grapple with.
Okay, like what?
Well, things like, political uncertainty, economic volatility, social inequality, and these rapid technological advancements, these are all forces that can have a significant impact on business decisions, and companies need to be prepared to adapt.
It's like navigating those choppy waters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of choppy waters, the document also mentions environmental turbulence, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that the business world is unpredictable.
Yeah, but it also kind of captures that sense that the pace of change is accelerating, right? Like things are moving faster than ever before.
Exactly. And, those traditional ways of doing business, they're just not enough anymore.
They're left behind.
They are. So how do you stay afloat in this kind of environment? Well, the study guide, it emphasizes 3 key strategies: agility, proactiveness, and innovation.
Okay, so break those down for me.
Right, so you got to be agile, adaptable, able to change course quickly in response to new information or shifting market conditions.
Exactly.
You've got to be proactive, anticipating those potential challenges and developing strategies to address them before they become crises.
Okay.
And then you've got to be innovative, constantly seeking those new ways to create value and stay ahead of the competition.
Those sound like pretty good strategies for any business, honestly, no matter how turbulent their industry might be.
You're absolutely right. I think in today's world, every company needs to be thinking about how to become more agile, more proactive, and more innovative. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving in this world that's constantly changing.
And it seems like all of those qualities are really closely linked to leadership.
Mm.
The study guide really stresses the importance of strong leadership, especially when it comes to, navigating that change and driving that innovation.
So true. And Chapter 12 really dives into that, the role of leadership in strategic management. It emphasizes that leaders need to be more than just managers. They need to be visionaries, motivators, and change agents.
So what are some of the key qualities that make an effective, strategic leader?
Well, the document outlines several key characteristics. So first, they need to be able to set a clear, compelling vision for the future.
Okay.
A vision that really inspires and motivates their team. Then they need to build a strong organizational culture that supports that vision and encourages that innovation and collaboration. They need to be decisive and make those tough calls where necessary, but they also need to be adaptable, able to adjust their leadership style to fit the situation.
Yeah, I can see how all of those qualities would be important, not just for, CEOs, but for leaders at all levels of an organization.
Absolutely. Every manager, supervisor, team leader, they all need to be thinking strategically about their role and how they can contribute to the overall success of the organization.
And speaking of the organization, the study guide also spends a lot of time on organizational architecture. What exactly does that mean, and why is it so important?
So think of organizational architecture as the blueprint for how your company is structured and how its different parts work together. So it's about making sure the structure, the systems, the processes, the culture, that it's all aligned with the company's strategic goals.
So it's like making sure everything is working in sync to support the company's strategy, like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. A well-designed organizational architecture that can be a powerful competitive advantage. It can help you execute your strategy more effectively, adapt to change more quickly, and create an environment where innovation and collaboration can really flourish.
And I'm guessing the McKinsey 7S framework, which we talked about earlier, that's a great tool for analyzing and improving that organizational architecture, right?
It is. It encourages companies to look at those 7 key interconnected elements: strategy, structure, systems, shared values, skills, staff, and style. By assessing each of these elements and understanding how they interact, companies can pinpoint areas for improvement and create a more aligned and effective organization.
So it's like that holistic approach recognizing that it's not just about one thing, it's about the whole system working together.
Exactly. And that system needs to be able to adapt and evolve, especially in today's, dynamic business environment.
Speaking of adapting and evolving, the study guide, it really hammers home the importance of adaptability and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that's the key takeaway from all of this. The world is changing faster than ever before, and companies need to be able to adapt.
You got it. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.
Right.
So the document outlines some key strategies for building adaptability and resilience, and they all revolve around creating that culture of continuous learning and improvement. So it encourages companies to empower their employees to embrace new ideas, challenge the status quo, and, be comfortable taking those calculated risks.
So it's not just about having a plan, it's about being able to adjust that plan as needed and, roll with the punches.
Absolutely. It's about being flexible in your decision making, being open to new ideas, and building strong relationships with all of your stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers, your investors, the community.
Those relationships are gold.
They are. They can be invaluable when you're facing challenges or trying to seize those new opportunities.
And of course, we can't forget about risk management. The study guide makes it pretty clear that having a solid risk management framework is, more crucial now than ever before.
You're so right. Chapter 14 dives deep into the world of strategic risk management, recognizing that uncertainty, it's a fact of life for any business. So it lays out a clear process for identifying, assessing, and managing those risks, from those, everyday operational risks to those existential threats that could sink the whole ship.
So it's not about trying to avoid risk altogether. It's about, understanding the risks that you're facing and making smart decisions about how to handle them.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between, being cautious and being bold. And the study guide, it uses some compelling real-world examples to really drive this point home.
Okay, like what?
Well, like Tiger Brands' listeriosis outbreak, which showed just how important food safety and quality control are.
Yeah.
And Toyota's airbag recall, which highlighted the, critical need for rigorous product testing and consumer protection.
Those are some cautionary tales.
They are, but they underscore the importance of having that proactive and comprehensive approach to risk management. You can't just tack it on as an afterthought.
Right.
It needs to be baked into everything you do.
And that's where, again, it seems like leadership really comes back into play, right? Leaders need to set the tone and create an environment where risk is taken seriously.
100%.
Wow.
Leaders need to, create an environment where employees can speak up when they see something that could be a problem.
Yeah.
They also need to make sure that the company has the resources and the processes in place to effectively identify, assess, and manage those risks.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. From analyzing the environment, to developing those strategies, to leading change and managing risk. Phew, it feels like a crash course in strategic management.
It is. But you know what's great about these concepts? They're not just for big corporations. They can be applied to organizations of any size.
Right.
From startups to multinational companies. And they can even be applied to your own career.
That's such an interesting point. So for you, the listener, whether you're an entrepreneur, a manager, or even individual contributor, these ideas, they could help you think more strategically about your work and make those more informed decisions.
Exactly. Strategic management, it's all about making choices that align with your goals and values and taking those actions that will help you achieve them. So it's about being proactive, being adaptable, being resilient in the face of change. And those are skills that can benefit you throughout your career, no matter what path you choose.
So you're saying this strategic thinking is something that can be learned and developed regardless of your background or your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a mindset and a skill set that you can cultivate over time. The more you practice strategic thinking, the better you'll become at it.
And the study guide and those case studies you've been working with, they provide a fantastic foundation for developing those skills.
They do. They introduce those key concepts, those frameworks, those tools of strategic management, and they show you how these ideas are actually being used in real-world businesses, particularly in that South African context.
So what's the next step? How can our listener take all these insights and actually turn them into action? That's what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive.
Exactly. We're going to shift our focus from understanding the concepts to actually applying them. We'll look at how you can develop your own strategic roadmap for success, whether you're working within an existing organization or, building your own entrepreneurial dreams.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time unpacking those core concepts of strategic management, from analyzing the business environment to crafting those, winning strategies. But now for the big question. How do you actually take all of this knowledge and put it into practice?
Yeah, that's where the real magic happens, right? It's about taking all those concepts, those frameworks, and tailoring them to your specific situation. Because, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to strategy.
Right. What works for one company
Might be a disaster for another.
exactly. So it's about finding the perfect strategy for your company in your industry at this exact moment in time.
Exactly. And that's where your strategic thinking muscles really get a workout. It's about, analyzing all the information you've gathered, making those tough choices, and charting a course that'll help you reach your goals.
That sounds pretty daunting. Where do you even begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is by, figuring out your company's purpose. Like, why does your company exist? What unique value does it bring to the market? What are those long-term goals you're striving for?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense
Mm.
if you don't know where you're going.
It's hard to get there, right?
Exactly.
So once you have that clear understanding of your purpose and your goals, then you can start to develop your strategic roadmap.
Roadmap.
And this roadmap, it outlines those steps you need to take to achieve your objectives.
And that roadmap needs to be flexible, right? I mean, the business world is like constantly changing.
Oh, absolutely. Your strategic roadmap, it's not set in stone, right? It's a living document, something you revisit and revise, regularly. So it's about setting a direction, but also being prepared to adjust your course as you go.
And sometimes those adjustments might involve taking some risks, right? I mean, innovation, it often requires stepping outside of your comfort zone.
That's true. But I think it's important to remember that smart risk management, that's a crucial part of strategic management.
Right.
So you don't want to be, reckless,
Right.
but you also don't want to be so afraid of failure that you miss out on those game-changing opportunities. It's all about finding that balance.
It's like walking a tightrope.
It is.
You got to be bold, but also calculated.
Exactly. And just like a tightrope walker, you need to be constantly adjusting and finding your balance as you move forward.
So speaking of moving forward, how can, our listener take all these insights and apply them to their own career?
Well, just like companies, individuals need to think strategically about their career paths. So where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? What skills do you need to develop to get there? What opportunities are out there? And how can you position yourself to seize those opportunities?
So it sounds like a lot of the same principles, they apply, even on an individual level.
They absolutely do. It's all about setting those ambitious goals, taking stock of your strengths and your weaknesses, spotting those opportunities, and then creating a plan to, make those aspirations a reality.
And just like with a company strategy, adaptability and resilience, those are key.
Oh, couldn't agree more. The job market, it's like this constantly shifting landscape, so you need to be prepared to adapt your skills, embrace new technologies, be open to new possibilities, just to stay ahead of the curve.
So for someone who wants to, become more strategic in their thinking and actions, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
That's a good question. I think I'd say just be curious, ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions. And most importantly, don't be afraid to think outside the box. The more you learn and explore, the better equipped you'll be to see the big picture, make those informed decisions and achieve your goals.
That's great advice. And, remember, strategic thinking, it's a skill. It's something you hone over time. It's not something you're born with, right? The more you practice, the better you get.
Exactly. And, the study guide, the case studies that you've been working with, they've given you this, solid foundation in strategic management.
A great starting point.
Now it's up to you, the listener, to take those insights and make them your own.
Put them into practice, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So go out there, be strategic, make those big moves happen.
Good.
We'll be here rooting for you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of strategic management. Until next time.